there was a moment in our history that we managed to have over 500,000 students from abroad. All of that free of charge. Those scholarships were free of charge. But the economic situation Cuba has been facing, especially lately, have prevented us from having that amount of students. So now we have much less students, but we have three modalities of scholarship. We have free of charge scholarship, we still have. We have a modality of people who can afford to pay for their scholarship and they come to Cuba to study. Mainly medicine, not only, but mainly medicine. And another modality is that some governments, let's say, for instance, Angola, want some students to study here in Cuba, and they pay the Cuban government for having the students and their formation here in Cuba. So we have these three modalities. Many of them, as you probably think, they cannot afford to visit regularly their countries. Some they do, but some no. So we have created that division to help them spend the 5-6 years here they're going to spend here studying in Cuba, and we try to make their lives easier. So that division also is linked to a national commission working with foreign students, and they regularly, we also work with them on regular basis. As I mentioned earlier, as our objective is to present our revolution, our project as it is, ICAP has been engaged in the most important issues dealing with Cuba, namely the lifting of the blockade that successive U.S. administration has imposed to Cuba. We can talk a little bit more about that later. The misinformation campaigns, as I mentioned also. Probably some of you will remember the case of Elian Gonzalez, that kid that was found in the sea and was taken to the relatives in the United States. ICAP was also involved in that. The case of the Cuban 5, probably you've heard about that too. 5 men who were in prison in the United States for the sole crime of fighting terrorism or preventing Cuba from terrorist actions. So those have been some of the activities that ICAP has been involved, and has been our main objective also is educate our friends, visitors who come to Cuba about this issue, to show our side of the coin that is not always presented. So we are here, in a nutshell, we are here to brainwash you. Okay? ICAP has work relations with over 2,000 association groups, committees, you name it, in more than 150 countries of the world. I always use the example that if we take into consideration an international organization such as United Nations that recognizes 170 something countries, and we have this kind of relationship with over 150, I will give you an idea of how wide, big, and world spread is the solidarity with Cuba work. In the case of the United States and Canada, in the particular case of the United States, we have an organization that it's like a network of not all, but many of the solidarity groups that we have in the United States, the National Network in Cuba, we have the pleasure to have one of the 5 co-chairs that this organization has here with us this morning, which is for us a pleasure to have her here. And this organization has been in charge of trying to coordinate actions all over the United States in solidarity with Cuba. That doesn't mean they are the only organizations that perform or carry out solidarity, because as solidarity is so wide in its meaning, we have relationship with trade unions, political parties, female organizations, youth organizations, all sorts of and right now, previously ICAP, there was an institution in Cuba, Cuban Movement for Peace, dealing with the issues related to peace. But now that institution was mingled with ICAP, so apart from solidarity, also ICAP deals with peace actions, and which is very linked to the organization that you represent, okay? So basically, in a nutshell, this is what ICAP does. Would like to, I know you've been in Cuba, so probably you know about Cuba, but probably you have questions about Cuba, especially because of what has been happening in Cuba in the last couple of years. So you have the floor. Now you feel free to ask either Lisita or me, whatever you would like to know or whatever you would like to update, have the most updated information, and we're here for you, okay? Oh, sorry, one thing I forgot, which is, I think, very important. ICAP also has an agency, which is called Amistur, the agency through which you visit Cuba. Amistur, and I'm making the promotion here for free. Amistur is the only agency in Cuba that is able to provide social, cultural, and political programs according to your needs. What does that mean? Let's say there's a group of trade unionists who want to come to Cuba, and they want to have an exchange with trade unionists in Cuba. Amistur can organize that. Same with a group of medical doctors want to come to Cuba to know about medicine, how that works in Cuba, public health. Amistur can organize that. So we can arrange a program according to the needs of our friends. I don't like to call them clients, because they're not clients. It's a too cold term in my opinion. So Amistur can provide these kind of programs. We organize everything on the ground, everything but the airfare ticket. Also, we have Julio Antonio Mella International Camp. Some of you have been there, right? In which we organize what we call the voluntary work brigades in solidarity with Cuba. It's a very long name, but the essence of that is it's a 15-day program with the same objective we have been discussing here, to show our reality, visiting hospital, polyclinics, schools, free time to have action with the Cuban population, with the Cuban people in the streets. Lectures, also include lectures on important issues dealing with Cuba, the revolution, or whatever. And yeah, that's basically, that is some of the things that we do. That is very quickly, but it takes a lot of time and effort and preparation, especially because we have people who ask about anything or everything in Cuba. So you have the floor. Please.
Wanted to bring a delegation,
Uh-huh.
let's say health workers, to meet with their homologous. We would, instead of talking directly to the Ministry of Health, we would go through ICAP.
Yeah,
And then Amistur would work out the logistics. Is that how?
Amistur along with ICAP, because Amistur belongs to ICAP. It's like our right hand or left hand, whatever.
So it's better to do that than directly to a ministry, or whether it's education or health or both.
It would be your choice, but my suggestion would be you present your interest. Let's say I want to visit a biotechnological center in Havana. I want to visit a polyclinic. I want to visit the School of Medicine, ILAM. I want to do this in Cuba, once in Cuba. You send that to Amistur or to us. We organize, prepare a program. Of course, we include some things that we think you might like to be included. We organize a program. If you agree with that program, we make the quotation, we send the quotation, and we make everything. The coordination with the Ministry of Health, whatever is needed for that program. We can do that. Yes.
Hi, I come from DC and I work with the Lawyers Guild, and we were here before, met with the lawyers. But I wanted to ask, there's a movement in the U.S. to decriminalize marijuana and drugs and so forth, and an activist in that movement came here a couple years ago, and he was very disappointed that he didn't get a warmer welcome for his ideas. And so I just thought I would ask you, what is the movement around decriminalization and marijuana and drugs, and also drugs that help your health? That's another thing they're working on.
in Cuba, that is a very interesting question, and we have received that kind of questions very quite often. In Cuba, first, there is no movement towards decriminalization of marijuana or any other drug of this type. We know that that especially marijuana have been in the treatment for many diseases, and it has proven there are proof that it's good for some treatments. But in Cuba, we have a very strong policy towards drugs, this kind of drugs. And especially in the case of marijuana, it's not because it's a very strong drug, but because it might be used as a jump to get to other more dangerous drugs. So because of and many of the decisions, and this is important to say it here, many of the decisions that today exist in Cuba are based on our own experiences, the experiences that we have had in the past. And this is one example. Before the triumph of the revolution, drug addiction in Cuba was a very serious issue. When the revolution triumphed, that was eradicated. At least that was the intention. That doesn't mean that in Cuba you cannot find marijuana, you cannot find drug addicts, you can find it, but it's important. The person who is a drug addict is treated as a person who is sick. So we treat the person, we treat the human being. We don't penalize and we don't criminalize the person who is an addict, but we treat him. What we penalize and we are very strict, our laws are very strict, is with the trafficking of that drug. Okay? And that is as I mentioned earlier, because of our own experience. That was very, very sad and cruel and put human being into we know there's probably, I'm not quite familiar with that. I don't know if that is something that is being in the agenda of the scientific community in Cuba to try to put that into, but according to our experience, I don't think that is going to happen. At least not for the coming 10 or 20 years, is what I think. You know, this is a revolution. Things have been changing in Cuba for the last 60 something years. But right now, I don't see it as something possible in a near future. Another example. You know, Cuba is accused of not being a democratic country because it only has one political party and so on and so forth. That is not because of the decision of Fidel or Raúl. There was an experience taken from our War of Independence. You know, one of the major issues that we faced in Cuba before the triumph of the revolution that prevent the revolution to succeed when we were in our war against Spain, it was precisely the lack of unity among the revolutionary forces. And was Jose Marti, our national hero, the one who came up with the idea of having only one political party to gather all Cubans who were in favor for the independence, with all and for the good of all. Okay? That doesn't mean that within the Cuban Communist Party we don't have differences of opinion. All the country. If you have been in Cuba, you know that Cuba has opinion about everything. Everything. Literally. So that is an experience that we took again when the revolution in the neo-colonial period from 1901, when we became a republic, to 1959, there were hundreds of political parties in Cuba. But none of them saw really the issue, the situation that the overwhelming majority of the Cuban population were suffering. So there was a need of an armed revolution. And after that, with the Fidel, remember Fidel was a Marti follower. He also saw the need of gathering all the forces into one strong political party leading the society. And that is what we have today. That's why I was mentioning earlier that almost every decision that we have, major important decision that we have taken in Cuba after 1959 has been based on our past experiences. Okay? You were?
Yeah, thank you. Also, I would say, just to dovetail on that, you don't have the luxury of being even seen as somewhat lenient because the United States will use that. I mean, the whole issue of any potential trafficking, you know, all that is just, we take that and magnify it, and there's been issues with that, I know, in the past, so they don't have that. So one question, I have a question, then like maybe like a comment, but you talked about the three modalities of international, of people coming here studying international. So we know ELAM, what other, besides medicine, what other things do people come from internationally to come learn? Is it, you know, what besides serse doctores, you know, like, or is there?
The majority of them right now are in the medicine field. So they're starting to become medical doctors, the overwhelming majority of them. but there's still some engineering, some teachers, especially physics education at school that physical education. And I will have to check right now how that is. But I knew nursery also, well, deals with also medicine as well. But engineering differently, and I will have to ask for, in the University of Havana, there are also other careers that people can aspire to. It depends on the particular interest of the government who is paying for that, or the person who wants to come to study in Cuba. But the ones who are free of charge, the overwhelming, for not saying all, but the overwhelming majority of them deals with medicine. In the case, sorry, now that you mentioned that, it's true, we have students from the United States. Actually, right now, at this moment, we have nearly 60. I'm not quite sure about the figure. I think it's 52. If we count the last 8 that came last week, it's around 50 something. We have already graduated 208 medical doctors from the United States. The majority of them, I think over 85%, have gone and successfully passed the STEP exams to be able to work in the United States. Over 85% of them. Some are waiting because you need money to pay for the exams, and it takes time. But actually, I must mention, they're very good students. They come to Cuba. They're selected through IFCO, Pastor for Peace, an organization that has been working in solidarity with Cuba for over 30 years, coming to Cuba on a regular basis every time. And so, if you know somebody who might be interested in being part of the ELAM project, someone who in the States cannot afford to pay for their studies, contact IFCO and they'll let you know what to do.
And then the follow-up, please. So you mentioned the international solidarity work, the brigadistas. I would propose or just show my experience in the United States. And there's a big movement, and it's growing, and it's very necessary. And I think it's very necessary worldwide, not just agriculture, but urban agriculture. Where people live, there's a possibility to grow food. And I'm a part of that in the United States. And I would just kind of propose that idea come to pass, because in the many, many times I've been here, there's very orgánicos, etc. But there's so many papios here, and there's so much need, a carencia, and there's not that culture of people individually taking charge, doing that for papios, and that would be something that many, many Americans would be super into coming to be brigadistas with.
Okay. We have been encouraging, actually there's a program to grow your own patio that is led by CDRs, which is the Committees for the Defense of the Revolution. That is an organization that is led now by Gerardo Hernandez Nordelo, who was one of the Cuban Five. ICAP president is also one of the Cuban Five. But that is something we have been encouraging leader by leader. But it's true, it's something that we need to work more on
There's a
that.
lot of solidarity in the U.S.
I don't know, probably, and this is my opinion. Well, it's a fact based. I'm basing my opinion on facts. You know, one of the issues that we had to solve at the very beginning of the revolution was education. Probably you know that we have a literacy campaign, a huge literacy campaign. After that, we have been encouraging and we have reached so high levels of instruction and education in our population that somehow that also has affected us. Why? Because people in the countryside especially wanted their daughters and sons to go to the university to study to become engineers, medical doctors. And so there's a lot of university graduates and very few people in the countryside to work the land, to put the land to produce. That is something also that we're trying to change that we have for many factors and many reasons, to be honest. One of them for sure was that probably we did not encourage that up to the extent that we should, encourage our own food production, our own farmers to produce. That is definitely part of the issue, but for many factors, that has not been happening. Now we're working more intentionally to solve that, to create that. But it's indeed something that we need to work more, definitely. Yeah.
So there used to be a program, or it may not have been a program, but we had a beneficial you could come here, U.S. students could come here and study Spanish. Is that still possible? And if it is, cost?
Yeah, that is possible. Actually, I've met people even from Turkey that have come to Cuba to study Spanish. In the University of Havana, they do have programs about that, and many other universities. You just have. I don't really know how much that costs. You should have to Google it probably. Oh, okay. You have an example. There you go. There you go. But the possibility is there. Although for you guys and girls, it's kind of difficult to come to Cuba. It's not because we're open for you, but you need to apply for 12 categories, whatever that means. Let's hope that will change in the future. Okay, question.
Yeah, thanks for talking with us. I'm curious about Cuba's relationship with China, just because China's been doing some great investment in Latin America and across the world. And I know Cuba sent doctors, I think, to China at the beginning of COVID, but is Cuba part of the Belt and Road, or what does the Cuba-China partnership look like nowadays?
Okay, I don't have the figure, the exact figure right now, but indeed China and Russia are two of our important economic partners, especially for the last 10 years or so, 8 years, as Canada is, as many other countries, as Venezuela is, despite all odds. I don't really know the amount in terms of figure, how much that is in between Cuba and China, and between Cuba and Russia. But many of the transportation we're using in Cuba comes from China and Russia, especially railroads. I don't really know up to the extent, in figures I mean, but it's one of our important economic partners, China and Russia as well. In the case also, you were mentioning China. I'm not quite sure if we have sent medical doctors to China, but what I do know is that we lately, just some months ago, less than a year, we, along with Vietnam, we worked together to create a factory to produce Cuban vaccines in Vietnam to help vaccinating that country, that population. COVID vaccine. I don't know if you are aware that we had 5 vaccine candidates. Of that, you cannot find much information in the big media. I don't know why, but we were able to create 5 candidates. 4 of them today are vaccines. One, which is Mambisa, is in phase 2, if I'm not mistaken. In phase 2, it's a nasal vaccine. It has proven so far to be very effective, even more than the previous one. And it's one of the, actually is the only nasal vaccine that is being developed in this time. With our own vaccines, we have been able to vaccinate nearly 90% of our entire population. You know, and I would say nearly because there's a number of people who cannot be vaccinated because of many details, factors. But we even have our population over 2 years old vaccinated already. Almost over 80, nearly 80%, 70-something percent of our population has the whole scheme plus the booster. Over 90% have already the 3 shots. And all of that have been reached with our own limited resources. And thanks to the help of many friends, including very, very dear friends that we have in the United States that have been doing all sorts of incredible things to help us with some raw materials that by law is prohibited to enter in Cuba, you know? And that, despite all that, we're here, we're still moving forward, little by little, but we're still here. Yeah.
For the last 20 years, Cuba's relations with Venezuela have been very important for both countries. The U.S. has also been trying to overthrow Venezuela, and Venezuela is having some difficulties in recent years, but I've been seeing some things lately. Things are improving somewhat. They're getting the oil production going some more, but on the other hand, the United States trying to block ships from being able to take oil from Venezuela to Cuba. Anyway, you probably are more updated on that than I am, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's curious, you know. History is there for us. We need to learn. Our enemies learn from history, you know. And the particular case or the particular relation between Cuba and Venezuela have proved that what I've just said. Why? Simple examples. You know, in the case of what happened in 1959, when the revolution triumphed, people who were in power at the moment, many of them, not all, but many of them were criminals, you know, they had criminal records. But a number also of people, wealthy people, abandoned this, which might be the opposition to that revolution. The majority of them leave this country, okay? Because many of them truly thought many of them were also misinformed. But the fact is that the overwhelming, and a huge number of them abandoned this country. That helped us indeed to take many of the measures that we took since the very beginning of the revolution. You know, this house, for instance, used to belong to a very wealthy sugarcane owner. And they abandoned this house, and there was the decision to use this house and many houses in Cuba after that for social interest, you know, ICAP headquarters. But in the case of Venezuela, when the revolution triumphed, the opposition stayed there and still there to trying to use that as a fifth column to oppose any measure taken by the revolutionary government of Venezuela. But then again, I said history. What is happening in Venezuela today, the design of what you're using in Venezuela today is exactly the same thing that they did or have been doing with Cuba. You know, misinformation and disinformation campaigns, economic warfare, terrorist actions, cyber attack. Well, at the revolution, there were not the development of what we have today, so social networks and so on. But bio attacks also, you know, you name it. Also, exactly the same thing they're doing today to Venezuela is what they have done to Cuba over. And in the particular case of Venezuela, especially that relationship became stronger because we used to have a very strong relationship since the time of Martí, which went to, the first time he visited Venezuela, he went directly to the statue of Simón Bolívar to pay tribute to Simón Bolívar, who was the freer or the I don't know if that term even exists in English, the liberator, of the person who freed practically all Latin America. And so there was a historical connection between Cuba and Venezuela, but that connection becomes stronger when Hugo Chavez took power in Venezuela. And the relationship they established, not only for Venezuela and Cuba, but also for the whole Latin America, creating ALBA projects and including the Caribbean basin, is a new model of collaboration, you know, in which what is more important is not the economic aspect of the relationship, but rather people themselves. Why? Because with ALBA project, Venezuela, for instance, mentioning what you just mentioned, was able to provide Cuba with oil, but in return, Cuba didn't pay with money, but with what we have, human resources. We send medical doctors, professors there to help them in many of the social projects that were carried out there in Venezuela. Many Venezuelans came here to study also. And this new kind of collaboration, which money is not in the center of the relationship, rather than what I have to offer to you in connection with what I need from you. That new kind of doing things is actually very profitable for both countries and for Latin America. But that is a bad example. That's why United States and even what they have with Cuba and Venezuela, it's incredible. You know, when you realize what they have done. One simple question: how they have been able to overcome all that. And I think my modest opinion is because of the support of the population. It's not true that Cuban revolution can be supported with political police and come on. You've been here. You've been able to. One of the safest countries in the world probably is Cuba. Which is, I cannot say the same in Venezuela, to be honest, especially not in Caracas. But part of the many changes that have been taking place in Venezuela is precisely to change that reality, to provide education, to provide people the opportunity to have a new present and a new future. You know, of course, there's still things to do, things to improve in here. We need to change and continue doing things to improve our economy. Many things that we need to do. But at least the only thing that we aspire is to be left alone and just ourselves being able to solve our situation. That is the only, and Venezuela, same thing. But that is why it's so important, the relationship between Cuba and Venezuela, because it's not, basically, money is not what is in the middle of that relationship, but real collaboration. Venezuela is today, I think it's also one of our probably top 5 economic partners. Again, I'm not an economist. I don't have the figures, but it's a very strong relation that not only economic relation, but also political and social relations that we have with Venezuela, of course. Yeah.
Part of the, is many people here actually, part of the Saving Lives campaign. It's a project of the National Network in sending the syringes. And Cuba, along with help from other places and their own, did the vaccination of the population. In terms of promoting, continuing the production of the vaccines, are there any, as far as you know, any specific needs that Cuba needs to promote production of the vaccines to then give to other places?
Okay. It's a very good question. And I wanted to leave it for the last, but I will take the opportunity to, now that you mention it, to thank all of you, all of those friends, people who were involved in the United States and in the rest of the world, because it was a worldwide campaign in Europe, in Asia, in many parts of the world, that help us in these very cruel moments that we lived with the pandemic and with the tightening of the measures that Trump administration put into place. I wanted to thank all of, on behalf of my personal name, but also on behalf of ICAP and on behalf of Cuba, for the effort, for that beautiful effort that you were able to push forward. That helped us a lot. And there are many, many other things that Cuba might need, that indeed we need. Raw materials for the production of our, over 90% of the basic medicines that we need for our population, over 90% of that is produced in Cuba. We can produce it. But the thing is that we don't have, in many cases, we have been banned from accessing to the raw materials to produce those medicines and those drugs. Antibiotics, things that for measuring sugar, you name it. There's a whole bunch of things that we need. And as I said before, we're extremely grateful for what you have been doing. But if you ask me, what we would need is definitely what we need is the blockade to be lifted. That is the answer, the most honest answer to that question, Because syringes, of course, they help and they did great and it was fabulous. But if we're not the blockade in place, we will not have will not be in the position or in the need of having our friends doing such an effort to bring that to Cuba or to send that to Cuba. So any action, anything that you could do in the United States to eliminate, to eradicate, to blow away that policy, it's more than welcome. There has been a number of cities in the United States that have been approving, passing laws, statements, resolutions. That is indeed one path. That is one way. Because in the end, it's in the United States where that is decided. Today is in the Congress of the United States. You know the composition of the Congress. I don't have to talk about that. And you know the situation for the coming November elections and the rest. You know that better than me. So it's up to you to solve that. It's a national issue that we cannot interfere. But anything that you could do in that way for us is more than welcome. Anything, even sit and talk with a friend, a relative, or a neighbor, explain. Because there's a lot of misinformation about Cuba. That communist country. Were you in Cuba? So how is that possible? How was the police? Probably many of you have faced that. And that simple thing of saying, is not, I was there, It's not paradise, it's not heaven, but it's not hell. And that is why it's very important to have you here. You know, checking firsthand, interacting, discussing. I'm not saying believe whatever I'm saying here. I'm just offering my side of the coin, as I said at the beginning. You've been here, you will be here, and you've been here for quite some time. So feel free to ask questions, interact with people, visit, check, and get to your own conclusion. At least when you return, we have met a lot of US people who have said, who are not communist, not socialist, nothing like that. And they'll come and say, at least I'm living with a different perspective than the one I brought. That, only that is 2 thumbs up. Very good. So, questions? More questions or? Yeah.
Could you say a little bit with regards to regarding Israel? To what extent has Israel been involved in lending support to the United States blockade against Cuba? Your view on that subject?
Cuba has presented a resolution for 29 years in a row at the United Nations General Assembly, calling for the ending of the economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the U.S. government to Cuba. In all times, the resolution has been approved by the overwhelming majority of the international public opinion. And Israel has been the indisputable partner of the United States in that voting. Even at the time, it was 2000, ¿cuándo fue la votación en que Estados Unidos se abstuvo? I think it was 2014 when we presented the resolution. You know, remember the reestablishment of diplomatic relations again with Cuba and the United States? And the United States abstained from vote. It was the only time the United States abstained, because it was not logical. If you're trying to reestablish diplomatic relations, you're trying to normalize the relationship. So they abstained again, Israel abstained. But every time the United States have voted, whatever the United States votes, Israel would be there supporting. You know, it's their perfect match to United States. And you know why. You know the support that United States government, and that is something in Cuba we try always to establish the difference. We have learned that something is what the U.S. government is trying to do to our nation, and something completely different is the feeling of the vast majority of the U.S. Population that is friendly to Cuba. That once they come to Cuba, once they know Cuba, they understand the need of having normal relations. Because the blockade is not only affecting Cuba, it's also affecting the United States. Okay? There's a number of biotechnological products that we have in Cuba that are in much need in the United States that you cannot access to them. You know, Everprot P, for instance. Everprot P is a medicine that is used to avoid the amputation of people who suffer from diabetes. And that is produced in Cuba. It's very good product. And you in the United States cannot access to that because it's produced in Cuba. Does that make any sense? I mean, you can go. We're mentioning Vietnam. You can go to Vietnam and be a tourist in Vietnam, a country in which American lives were lost, and you cannot do it in Cuba. How is that possible? Why?
With regard to Israel, they were a robust trading partnership with Cuba, right?
Sorry?
Israel trades with Cuba despite voting against their investment. And they may have well broken the blockade. No?
Well, again, I'm not an economics. I'll have to check that information.
There's investment like in hotels.
Yeah.
There's several there's several hotels here that are Israel based. I was going to ask that. How did they reconcile that?
What's the source of that information?
Tours there.
I'll have to check.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I don't really know. Because I know our position of Cuba with Israel in regards, in Palestine and all that. I don't really know. So I'll have to check that. I cannot say because I don't really know.
I just want to say something about that because I know we have some issues with not only with Israel, also with Korea and other countries, but that issues are mostly in the political field. And even though we have strong positions in the political field, it doesn't mean that we are not open to commercial treaties, to exchange because we need that. So we cannot be close both in the political and in the economic field. Cuba has a lot of scarcities and a lot of problems in getting financing and getting the budget to develop itself. So we in the economic field, we are not as close, as we are in the political field. So we have, even though we have, I repeat, not only with Israel, also with Korea, with South Korea, and with other countries, we have this policy against Cuba, and it has been supporting U.S. policies during the past years, but in the economic field, we're more open because we need to be that way. Because Cuban people need it. So it's different. It's treated different in both ways. That's the thing that I want to say.
I guess you're surprised, not that Cuba would totally accept any investment and even any kindness politically from anybody, but that Israel would have that position. It's not that Cuba would accept it right on, but that Israel would do that. Yeah. Well, we'll find out, yeah.
Even we receive donations from those countries too, and he said it's crazy, but it's what happens in real life, and real life is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a number of U.S. congressmen and congresswomen who want to have trade with Cuba, but they cannot. So if we were able to do that, definitely we will do it. Okay.
I know you're good with difficult questions.
I do my best.
In terms of the eventos, the protests in July 11th, I know President Canel explained very well the different kinds of motivations for people that participate, from paid directly from the U.S. to just frustration with shortages. I thought I heard, and possibly wrong, that after that there were some changes made, either laws or regulations or something. I'm not sure. Were there any changes that you know that were made?
Okay. Remember, I somehow have been mentioned either, I don't know if clearly stated or some other way. Cuba has been a country in constant change, in constant revolution, changing many things. If you were here, probably if you were here 5 years ago, was completely different, and 10 years before it was even more different. So many things have been changing in Cuba lately. As you correctly expressed, there was a number of issues that bring about the situation of July 11th, which is not something new. That something similar happened in 1994 with the falling of the Soviet Union. Remember, special period, Cuba was a very difficult economic situation that we were facing, and we lived something similar like that. And it's again history. So the mechanism and the reasons why, and they were practically the same. You know, the difficult situation with COVID that we were facing at that particular moment, the situation that we were facing with, remember, Trump, the cutting of remittances to Cuba, the possibility or the impossibility for cruise ships to come to Cuba. They were cutting the access to fuel, which brought about a lot of shortages in our stores. All of that mingled and brought about blackouts because of the lack of fuel to produce energy. All that brought about July 11th and the discontent. With that, there was a number of people who were honestly and frankly discontent with the situation, but they were not against the revolution. They were just expressing themselves. That was the way they saw in a very difficult moment to express their anger or their situation or whatever. But there's, in that period of time, we're organizing also the Congress of the Cuban Communist Party, which among the main topics that were going to be analyzed was precisely the economic situation and the future of Cuba in that sense. And many of the social problems that we were facing. And in the Congress, we acknowledge and we recognize that many of the projects, social projects, that in the special period we took, many of them were shut down or closed or they were not active anymore, you know, which also contributed to the social situation or the kind of social situation that we're facing right now. So that was going to be addressed. July 11 pushed that more, you know. But the idea of what is happening now is not something that was caused by July 11. Probably July 11 what helped us in fueling the decision of taking those measures, of carrying out those measures that we're taking now. But it's something that was coming to an end. For instance, things that have changed is the collaboration, because I don't want to say intervention of the government in some neighborhoods in the entire country, mainly in Havana, but in the entire country, which had a very difficult situation, you know, because of the problems, the economic problems we have been facing. Many of these neighborhoods were having problems for housing problems, electricity access, running water. And then for many years, many of these people who live in this neighborhood were claiming for a solution, were asking for a solution to the government. And the solution practically never comes. Now what we're doing is that was also analyzed in the country, and some good ideas were put into place. Now, for instance, we have in Havana only, we have around 100 neighborhoods, small neighborhoods, who are being into that. The government gets there, analyze with the population what are the most important and most difficult things, because we cannot solve all of them, because we don't have the resources to solve all of the problems that they have. And the population themselves are the ones to decide, okay, we need to solve the pavement of the street, the housing for so this amount of families, the electricity here, what these are the most difficult problems that we need to solve right now. Okay, and the government say, okay, perfect. So now we provide the resources to that, and with the collaboration of the neighbors, work to solve that problem. And that has been given some good response from the population, because in the end they are involved in the solution of their own problems, and many of the things that many of the discomforts that created that July 11 are being treated, issued, and people are much more calm and understand, because in the end they understand that we don't have the resources to solve all of that, all of what they need at the same time. But apart from that, you're mentioning some changes that are taking place. Cuba, for the last 2 years, we have been involved in updating, let's use that word, updating probably our entire judicial set of laws. The Constitution, a new Constitution was approved. Many laws have been updated. Right now we are in the middle of the discussion with the population of a new code of families, because we understand the situation that the conditions that today exist in Cuba, social conditions, are completely different as the one we had when we approved the family code that we have, that was approved in 1975. So today we have completely different families, which doesn't mean they're dysfunctional families, but they're new families formed by grandparents with their grandchild, and that is a family, because the parents leave the country or whatever, or are dead. People who want to, of the same sex, who want to have the opportunity of creating a family. All of that is being under review, but again, we are accused of being a non-democratic country. You can check the discussion and the final approval of the Constitution, and the discussion that this family code of families is going to arrange. It's because, as I mentioned, Cuban people have opinion about everything. But that is also under attack. That is being used to try to attack the Cuban Revolution. In many ways. So yes, many laws in Cuba have been under review, because we needed to adapt the new life, the new concrete economic, political, and social situation we are living today in Cuba, we needed to update all set of laws and all set of things that the things that we need to do are today different than the ones we were doing 10, 20 years ago. And we are in the middle of that. But that is not, and I want to make the highlight this idea, this is not because of July 11th. This is something that was happening at a certain pace, you know, but probably July 11th fueled the decision in many of the things that we are doing today. Yeah.
I want to say something about July 11th, and it's kind of my vision of the events, of the social events, and I want you guys to think about something. You Cubans, we are used to in our whole lives to debate. This is part of who we are, and okay, I'm sorry. And we are used to talk about the problems with our representatives, and we do that a lot in our neighborhoods, in our schools. We meet with our representatives all the time, and then that stopped with the COVID. And that, even though we don't see it that way, that affects us, because we don't have those spaces we used to have to talk, to debate, to talk about our concerns. And I'm not saying, of course, July 11 put some issues on the table and put some troubles on the table, but what I think what really happens is all our processes, all our social processes stop with the COVID-19 too. And now that we are going to normal life, and then we are taking those processes again. But COVID-19 also affects, and maybe it affects us, more widely, because we are so used to it. We are so used to debate, to talk to our representatives, to talk about our concerns with our chiefs, with our higher chiefs. And with COVID-19 we don't have those spaces. So we are having those spaces now again. So we are taking, now it seems that everything that is happening is because of July 11, but actually what is happening is we are going back to a normal life, and a normal life is like this way. We are also debating, we are also taking new resolutions about our life, and I think that's important to be taken into account.
So I love, so all of us here probably in the United States, we're involved with our local everything. And I love twice what you just said. We're so used to talking to our representatives. My representative to Congress, that's kind of a high level. I know there's so many other levels. Happens to be in my town, but like, let's say on your block where you live, if someone has an issue on their block, ¿a dónde van? Like, what's the next level up? What is their most local person that they can quejar or, cuestionar or whatever? What's that next step as an individual on a block?
Is the president of the CDR. I mean, each block is organized in CDRs. I mean, Revolution and Defense Committees. So the main step we also do is we want to talk to the president of the CDR, and we take all issues. If a pipe is broken, if we have troubles with our ceiling, stuff like that, we go and to talk with the CDR organizer, with the president of the CDR, and then there is a higher level, which is the delegate of the neighborhood, which is the highest level of that. It's the person commanding like 5 or 6 CDRs, and so we meet with that person too. At least, ¿cuántas veces nos reunimos con el delegado?
2 veces en el año.
2 times per year. So we can debate if the president don't solve our problems or give us some answers, maybe about the street, maybe about the story of the community, something like that. Then we can ask that to our delegate, and so on. And the delegate is going to have its representative in the popular committee, in the popular power of the municipality, and then it goes higher and higher. But we have in each neighborhood a CDR organizer, a president of the CDR, and that's the first person we go to.
And well, we have you here. So he mentioned that Gerardo is now the head of the CDRs.
Yes.
What is he doing, and what are you all doing at a local level to reinvigorate the CDRs? What are to make them more
Look,
reinvigorated?
it's just we are not. I mean, we are not. I don't think it's my vision. We don't think that we need to revigorate. I mean, our social. I mean, our common, our current social lives do that. For instance, now we are debating the family code. We are doing that in our neighbors. Without this kind of debates in our neighbors with our neighbors, and we sit there and we debate about the family code, and we debate about all the problems that we have in the community. Even if we want now, Gerardo is visiting. That's very important. Is visiting neighbors all over the country. That's very important for us, for the common citizen, to have representatives to come to visit us. And we are now that we are developing these projects of plant in our yards or in our gardens. That he's helping with that. He's giving ideas. He's providing with tools and mechanisms to help us to do that, because the country needs that. That's very important. Another stuff.
In the case of going back to the spaces that we have for a claim or some, probably, I don't know, I was talking to the phone, I don't know if she mentioned. We meet with our representative every 6 months. So we have 2 times in a year. We call it, no, but you were asking about what is Gerardo and the CDR doing. But as I was going a little bit backwards in terms of the options that we have whenever we have a problem, how to address it, how to put it. We meet with our reps at the local level every 6 months. So he have to give account of what he has been doing or she has been doing. Yeah. No, and there are more she's than he's, to be honest. Actually, our parliament is the 3rd in the world with women representation. That's important. Over 62%, 62 something, nearly 63%. So every 6 months that person must come. Of course, all of this was blocked with the pandemic, as she was mentioning. Every 6 months, that person comes, that rep, and say, okay, in our last meeting, we had a complaint about the whatever.
The park of the community, the store of the community.
You name it, whatever. So in this period of time, I met with this, I did whatever. The solution right now is not possible, or the solution, we are in a plan for 2024 to be included for the solution of that specific problem. Either say what is the solution going to be, or saying, explaining what that problem cannot be solved at this point in time. We have that possibility every 6 months. But elections in Cuba, midterm elections in Cuba, take place every 2.5 years. So that means that representative should be at least 5 times before he could be, again, elected or not, see 5 times in front of the population saying, giving account of what he or she has been doing.
That's not the CDR, that's delegados.
Delegados, exactly. Cuba is a very institutionalized country. So many institutions work together to try to address and solve if possible. That is very beautiful, but in practice sometimes we face real concrete problems that prevent us from having the problems solved. So 5 times if, let's say we are a community and we elected Alicita as our rep, but if we're not in agreement with what she has been doing, we have the right to revoke her and come again to elections and elect a new rep for. So that I know, and you don't need to go to midterm elections to solve that. I don't know if that is possible in the United States or many countries of the world, but at least in Cuba it's possible. You have the possibility of revoking our reps that can or cannot be member of the Cuban Communist Party. Okay? So let's say that is I am a person who said we have this problem, Alicita. Alicita automatically is a member of the municipal assembly. So that she has that space, municipally speaking, to say, okay, my community has this problem, and that municipal assembly meets with the municipal reps or the government and the local governments or the local authorities of the party and the government, as well as the institutions that in that municipality are located. That's another space. But probably Alicita is elected to be part of the executive, that also can happen, of the municipal assembly. So automatically she was part of a structure which right now doesn't exist, of the provincial level. That structure right now does not exist. But then the connection between Alicita and the municipal assembly is directly with the National Assembly. But the intention right now with the new constitution and the new laws that we have been approving is to provide more power to the local authorities to solve directly the issues. If they can, then they can go to the highest level, which is the National Assembly. But the intention is right now to empower more local governments and local representatives in the solving of the situations the neighborhoods are facing. These are some of the spaces that we have. But in the case, let's say that is what regularly happens. But let's say there's something as important as a new constitution that is going to be approved, or the new family code, or the new code of families. It's a big problem. We discussed it at the neighborhoods, in our CDRs. We discussed it in our workplace. She discussed it as part of the Young Communist League in her cell. I discussed it in my grassroots cell of the Cuban Communist Party, which I belong to. And there's the Constitution, for instance. In my case, I discussed it like in 5 times, in different spaces. I expressed my opinion, and I can say that one of my proposals was not taken into consideration with the new constitution, but at least I had the opportunity of saying it. expressing that. Say, and that I know was analyzed, and in the end, the decision was okay, no. But I had the opportunity of saying, and it's my example, but the entire Cuban population discussed it at least one time, at least.
Can I just say one thing, kind of going to July 11th, I just wanted to mention real quick, our friend Medea Benjamin, who you know very well, I'm sure, I think she came down to observe these mass demonstrations, and she found like somebody doing a mime performance or something. She literally couldn't find any demonstrations. There were like some art things going on, so nothing really happened in the street.
Well, on July 11, it did happen.
Oh, it did. Okay.
They tried to put on November 27 another show like that, but it was a complete, you know, exactly, bluff, a bluff. Or flow. No, I would say rather than it was more a bluff, because in the end, nothing happened. Okay? Actually, the person who was supposed to be the leader of that didn't do anything, and 3 days after that, left for Spain. Is now in Spain.
Wow.
No, it's a luchador anti. So it's they have their terms for it.
Yeah, and I think what you all just said was super helpful for us, and so interesting, so participatory, right? In the United States, like I said, you know, that local level is totally disconnected from our federal levels of federalism, and we have the local, que no se habla with the. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense as if we're two different countries or something. But anyway, what do you do? Because I'm a teacher, high school. So many young people, so many people, they're never going to go to a CDR meeting. Les solo quieren like quejar y whatever. Where do those people go to express themselves that isn't in? You know, how could they go to give their ideas? How do you help involve people who are not interested in participating?
Okay.
You need to know too.
The membership to a CDR is voluntary. You cannot force anybody to be a member of the CDR. And kids over 14 years old have the possibility of being a member in the biggest mass organization of Cuba. The CDR is the largest number mass organization in Cuba. So that means that by the age of 14, every Cuban have the possibility to go there and express whatever he or she thinks he has to say. And he has a voice and he has a vote. Okay. A vote is it's with 16 years old, but at least from 14 to 16, he has a voice to express whatever he or she thinks needs to be solved. Yeah, you wanted to add something?
Sí. Also, I mean, we have organizations at schools. It's not only the Communist League. I mean, the Young Communist League. That's an organization that it's okay. That you can be part of it if you want, if you feel that you want. But there are other organizations that are mass organizations when students are at school, right? At least at a scholar level. It's just the FEM is the high school. Is for high school students. FEU is for college students. So those organizations develop assemblies at classrooms, at school, in those places that are proper for young people, and they can debate there. Also, here teachers are politically involved in all the country decisions. So they have even in the classroom we have these materials like political culture and things like that, when students can discuss about the things that are happening in the society. the things that are happening at the moment of the society. In those materials, they can have the opportunity. If not, they also can have it with other students in the organizations of that students. As I said, FEM and FEU, Pilar, even the small children have an organization. It's called Jose Marti Organization. Pioneers Organization is for children. They can discuss there. They have these assemblies, one assembly per month, so they can debate everything they want, everything they think is interesting for them. So they have those spaces.
And at the workplaces, trade unions have the possibility to meet every month, every 2 months, or every 3 months. That is agreed into the bargaining agreement, collective bargaining agreement. And they have that space also to say whatever they want to say about their. So what I mean is, there is several opportunities. Going back to the students organize their own congresses in which the leaders of the revolution are there listening firsthand what the kids have to say to them, what their worries are, what their aspirations are. So what I mean is, there is a huge numbers of spaces in Cuba to express whatever you want. The problem is that many of these so-called dissidents, they don't use these spaces either, first because they know they're huge minority, and because most or many of the things they're saying or they're claiming for are not real, are built, or if they're real, they don't address or they don't recognize the real person or the real place to blame. You know, many of them, they don't recognize Cuba is under the longest and the cruelest economic siege to a nation ever in the history of mankind. So they forget about that. They want to forget about that. And they just try to use that to attack the revolution. But spaces, we can have many to express whatever.
And also in these meetings, I was talking about when we do these assemblies in our classrooms with our students, we take notes and we fulfill an act, a paper a report, and we deliver that to municipalities organization. I mean, to the municipality place, so they can have a record of our questions or our problems, all the things we have. So we deliver that so they can know and they can do something about it. So that's the way.
We wanted to, some of you probably know her, some know. Sandra Ramirez, our head of the division.
Good to see you. I know many faces here. So good to see you again here in Cuba, and thank you for coming to the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the People. I know that you have had a good exchange with Jamil and Alicia, and so to ICAP, it's also, we always want to welcome groups coming from the United States, but especially at this moment. So it has a great significance when we receive friends from the United States due to the great campaign some people have carried out against Cuba. But you will see how our country strives itself to go forward in the middle of this pandemic, and I hope that you can have a good program. And I hope you can return again to Cuba, and that you will learn about what we are doing during the pandemic. That it hasn't been easy, but we managed to go forward, and thanks to the solidarity of friends like you. Okay, I don't want to just take much of your time, because I know that you will go now to the Museum of the Revolution.
Well, let's give an applause to Alicia for the great presentation. Great presentation, and thank you all of you. And Sandra's going to stay here a little bit to talk to some of you, and not David, you have an appointment with her already. And we should get maybe a picture, a group picture. Okay? How about if we...
How many are from Minneapolis? I have been in Minneapolis. Yes, I was in Minneapolis.
Yeah. Mall.
Ah.
Do you remember that? It was Somali Mall.
Yes, I hear. Yeah, I love that.
That crazy